allow them to divide us up. There is nothing we cannot accomplish. Let's do it. Thank you.
Today, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about two issues that are interlocked. One is the recently released Paradise Papers, which talk about how billionaires are able to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. And secondly, is the disastrous Republican tax plan. So let me start off by telling you what you already know, is that we live in a country today which has massive levels of income and wealth inequality, worse today than at any time since the late 1920s. We have a situation where the top 0.1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Incredibly, and this is really quite hard to believe, the three wealthiest people in this country, three people, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and Warren Buffett, own more wealth than the bottom half of American society, 160 million Americans. Meanwhile, while the people on top have such incredible wealth, 40 million Americans are living in poverty. The middle class has been shrinking for 40 years, and 28 million Americans have no health insurance at all. But it is not only the reality of the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality that makes the American people so angry. It is the reality that the people on top, with their incredible wealth and power and access to lawyers and accountants, are able to manipulate the system to benefit themselves at the expense of everyone else. And that, after all, is what the rigged economy is all about. The major issue of our time, in my view, there are a lot of major issues out there, believe me, but the issue that I worry about so much is the rapid movement toward international oligarchy, in which a handful of billionaires own and control a significant part of the global economy. We're not just talking about the United States of America. We're talking about the entire global economy. A group of investigative journalists released over 13 million files known as the Paradise Papers, exposing just how bad this situation has become. These papers show how a handful of oligarchs in the United States and throughout the world get richer, much richer, by hiding their wealth and profits offshore to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. You know, it's a funny thing. All of these American billionaires, they love the military and they love the veterans and they love schools and they love infrastructure, but they don't want to pay anything to maintain those people and maintain those institutions. They want you to pay. So they love the military, but it's your job to pay taxes to support the military, not them. The list of individuals involved in the Paradise Papers include billionaires like the Koch brothers, Sheldon Adelson, Carl Icahn, and Robert Mercer. And these are guys, by the way, while they're busy shielding their money from taxation, apparently have many, many hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on campaigns to elect right-wing extremists who will protect the wealthy and the powerful. They can't pay taxes, but they do have a lot of money to spend in politics. It also includes such large financial institutions such as Wells Fargo, Citigroup, and Bank of America. It includes, in the Paradise Papers, corporations like Apple, Nike, and ExxonMobil. And shock of all shocks, and I know you're really going to be shocked to hear this, it includes members of the Trump administration like Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, Chief Economic Advisor Gary Cohn, and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. Let's be clear. Offshore tax evasion is a major problem, not just for the United States, but for governments throughout the world. In 2012, the Tax Justice Network released a statement and a report that is absolutely incredible. And in that report, they estimated that at least $21 trillion, let me repeat it, not 21 million, not 21 billion, $21 trillion is being stashed in offshore tax havens all over the world. The situation has become so absurd that one 5-story office building in the Cayman Islands is now the home of nearly 20,000 corporations. Can you believe that they have 20,000 corporations right in that building, 5-story building? And of course, they don't have 20,000 corporations in that building. It's all a fraud. And what it's about is these corporations, 20,000 of them, are using that address in the Cayman Islands in order to avoid taxes. That's all it is. In the United States, offshore tax evasion cost our government about $160 billion in lost revenue each and every year. $160 billion. That's money that could go to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, roads, bridges, water systems, and create some 15 million good-paying jobs. That's money that in a competitive global economy can be used to make public colleges and universities tuition-free. That's money that could be used to provide high-quality, universal pre-K and child care to every infant, toddler, and young child in our country. Now, I find it funny, certainly not surprising, that instead of trying to crack down on offshore tax schemes, Trump and the Republicans in Congress are working overtime to pass legislation that would make this very bad situation even worse. And now we're talking about the Republican tax bill in the House, and one's coming up here soon in the Senate. At a time when corporations are making record-breaking profits, my Republican colleagues want to slash taxes for companies that are shifting American jobs to China and American profits to the Cayman Islands. Incredibly, the territorial tax system they are proposing would exempt the offshore profits of American corporations from U.S. taxes and allow for a one-time 12% tax on their offshore profits when brought back into the United States. In addition, at a time when 1 out of every 5 large profitable corporations in our country paid no federal income taxes at all, these guys want to lower the corporate tax rate from 35% down to 20%. In addition, at a time of massive wealth and income inequality, Trump and the Republicans in Congress want to cut taxes for billionaires big time by repealing the estate tax on families who inherit over $5.5 million. And this is so unbelievable that it really is hard to explain. Massive income and wealth inequality, rich are getting richer, and what Trump and his friends want to do is repeal the estate tax, which would mean up to a $50 billion tax break for the Walton family, wealthiest family in America, over a $30 billion tax breaks for the Koch brothers family. How insane is that? What kind of priorities, what kind of morality is involved in that decision making? Meanwhile, while the wealthy and large corporations are receiving incredibly large tax breaks, nearly half, listen to this, nearly half of middle-class families would actually see their taxes go up by the end of the decade. Got that? By the end of the decade, about half, almost half of middle-class families would see their taxes go up. And the reason for that is the elimination of deductions for medical expenses, the elimination of deductions for adoption, student loan interest rates, state and local income and sales taxes, and the cost of health insurance for the self-employed. And if they are able to pass this legislation, it would blow a giant hole in the deficit. Now, you all remember, year after year, my Republican colleagues talk about the deficit, how terrible it is, how horrible it is that we have a $20 trillion national debt. Well, this legislation would blow a giant hole in the deficit, increasing it increasing the national debt by about $1.8 trillion over a 10-year period. And what does that mean? What the Republicans will do the day after this thing is passed, and we're going to do everything we can to prevent it from being passed, is they would say, well, the deficit is going up. We have to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And that's exactly what they proposed in their budget. Massive cuts to Medicaid, $1 trillion, Medicare, almost $500 billion, and they will get to Social Security sooner than later. Now, it seems to me that instead of providing even more tax breaks to profitable corporations and billionaires in Trump's cabinet, people who avoid billions in U.S. taxes, we need to close offshore tax loopholes and demand a fair and progressive tax system. And here's where you can become involved. Together, we stood up and we fought back successfully in opposition to this disastrous health care proposals that the Republicans brought up a few months ago. You know, they wanted to throw 16 million people off of health care, or 20 million people, or 32 million, depending on the proposal. But the American people stood up at rallies, at town meetings, on social media, and they fought back. Well, we have to do that right now in terms of this disastrous tax package that the Republicans are working on. They hope to get this thing done very quickly before the American people understand what's in it. But our job is to defeat them. And our job is now to get the word out in every and any way that we can, to tell members of the House, tell members of the Senate, that now is not the time to be giving massive tax breaks to the very richest people in this country. Now is not the time to be raising taxes on middle-class families, and now is not the time to be increasing the deficit so that Republicans can go forward and cut Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. So we need to come together on this issue. Please do everything you can to work with us. Let's defeat this very, very dangerous piece of legislation. Thank you all very much.